Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 73 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, last week's episode certainly got a lot of attention. I received more correspondence, emails and phone calls on last week's show than any previous show. And the subject last week was the deeper agenda, literally and metaphorically. The agenda to effectively turn the UK into a toxic nuclear waste disposal dump. And we're joining the dots between what is currently being presented in terms of an unconventional gas agenda and the longer term agenda, potentially to use those deep wells as repositories for toxic nuclear waste. And we're putting together the pieces of the jigsaw. Now, you can certainly expect that the establishment and the unconventional gas industry is going to completely dismiss these observations as just a rampant conspiracy. But on the basis that the British government isn't exactly renowned for, shall I say, absolute veracity, so I think we have to take any denials with the proverbial pinch of salt and keep joining the dots. Meanwhile, I would encourage all anti-fracking community groups around the country to watch episode 72 to decide for themselves whether or not this is something that they certainly need to be keeping a watch for. Now, up until earlier today, the YouTube from last week was showing as having 1,350 views, but there was evidently something not right with the YouTube counter, because last Thursday and Friday it actually was going backwards. So whether it's 1350 or a few more, we don't really know, but that's the number being displayed, and I think that we need to see a few more numbers on that. Now, much of what I presented last week was based upon my visit to an event hosted by Radioactive Waste Management in Plymouth. And at that event, I was joined at my table later in the evening by this particular individual. Now, I didn't immediately recognize him, but eventually I realized that I had seen his face before. This is Professor Ian Stewart, and he is based at Plymouth University, and he's the director of the Sustainable Earth Institute, the School of Geography, Earth and Environmental Sciences, the Faculty of Science and Engineering. Now, I want to draw your attention to the fact that he is the director of the Sustainable Earth Institute. So, not too surprisingly, I think this is 2011, because that's the last time Wednesday was the 28th of September, and he was giving the 60th anniversary lecture titled The Green Planet at Allington Hall, Shrewsbury School. So one could be forgiven for thinking that, as director of the Sustainable Earth Institute and a previous presenter of the Green Planet lecture, that this particular academic would be vehemently anti-unconventional gas and indeed anti-nuclear, but that would not be the case. It was Professor Ian Stewart who narrated the documentary. I think it was put out by Horizon on BBC, where he went to Pennsylvania to look at the unconventional gas industry in Pennsylvania, and actually didn't declare a hand one way or the other. But the producers, of course, who control the editing, did exactly what you'd expect and effectively biased it towards the pro-fracking agenda. Well, in the course of the conversation, Professor Ian Stewart made it abundantly clear that despite the title of Director of the Sustainable Earth Institute, he is pro-unconventional gas exploitation and pro-nuclear. So he's based in Plymouth, so I'm actually going to give him a call during the week and invite him to join me here in the studio, and we could have a pretty frank discussion. But I wouldn't put too much money on him actually agreeing to join me. But there's something else I want to draw your attention to, because when I was researching Professor Ian Stewart's background, I stumbled across this. And this is an invitation for applications for a PhD study. And the title of this PhD study is Tracking Fracking, Social Media as a Platform for Communicating and Engaging with Contentious Environmental Science. And sure enough, Professor Ian Stewart is one of the supervisors for this 3-year PhD study. Well, let's have a look at what the project aims are. So the project aims for this study are to examine how environmental NGOs and community opposition bodies use online and offline media as a communication tool. 2, to compare and contrast depictions of contentious environmental issues, e.g. fracking, in scientific and industry websites with those in environmental and other opposition websites. And 3, analyse the way in which information and imagery are presented, represented and read by receivers. Track the evolving social media communications, online and offline, of leading pro-issue and anti-issue groups to determine the leading narratives emerging from opposing sides of the debate. And 5, explore the wider potential role of new social media as a transparent platform for broader public engagement, better industry community dialogue, and more effective conflict resolution. So let me paraphrase. The establishment realises that it has no current answer to the burgeoning anti-fracking community, these 450 plus independent autonomous community groups that are spreading throughout the UK. And so now they're looking to engage a PhD student to infiltrate the anti-fracking community and write up their findings and provide the establishment and the industry with a way of countering the effectiveness of the anti-fracking campaign, and maybe other campaigns that adopt a similar model. Well, my thanks to Pippa King for this particular model, because Pippa agreed to do a little bit of research for me and look at some of the funding for this particular course. And as we can see, as is always the case, stuff rolls downhill. So we see at the top of this, the Department of Business, Innovation and Studies providing funding to research councils, which in turn provides funding to the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, the Natural Environment Research Council, and the Economic and Social Research Council, which in turn all feed money into the UK Energy Research Council, which then in turn funds this study. So this is an industry-funded PhD research project. So my counsel to any community groups is, if you get an invitation from a PhD student saying they'd like to come and talk to you because they'd like to do a little bit of research into how the anti-fracking community is sharing its information, well, the polite answer should be basically on your bike. And they can do the research once we've nailed this insidious industry. And I mentioned this last week. This is a graphic from the Greenpeace Energy Desk, and a superb piece of research which tables the amount of funding provided to universities around the country by the hydrocarbons industry. Actually, it doesn't show Plymouth University as having taken any funding directly, but certainly Exeter University has. So anyway, more on that issue next week, where we'll be exploring a little deeper into the deep borehole disposal agenda and providing a little bit more background that the government doesn't want you to find. So now let me change tack, because tonight, well, I am absolutely honoured to be joined again by a lady who has really been a thorn in the side of the unconventional gas industry in North America, and particularly in Pennsylvania. And this was a headline in the British Guardian, I think almost 2 years ago now. The anti-fracking activist barred from 312.5 square miles of Pennsylvania. And the article stated that the court injunction brought in by oil and gas company, as is Cabot, makes even supermarkets off limits for Vera Scroggins. So Vera has been effectively somewhat restricted in her activities, but that hasn't diluted her activities in any way, shape or form. And as we're going to hear over the next few minutes, the industry has increased its attack on Vera. So Vera, welcome to Fracking Nightmare episode number 73.
Hi there. Hi, Ian. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us. I know it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we can see your grandchildren doing a bit of baking in the background there. So it's hi to Nevada and Arizona.
Thank you. Yes.
And thanks for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Vera, we've got a bit of a delay in the time here. But what I want to do before we talk about the increasing pressure that's been put on you, you've actually had a couple of VIP visitors over recent weeks, and if you can cast your mind back, I think about 8 weeks or so, you were in the company of a British MP by the name of Kevin Hollinrake.
Yes, I was, and his wife, and then a council person. Bob Gardner, something like that, if I remember correctly. Okay. So they came, plus BBC reporter, Donnie, I forgot her last name now, and her photographer. So, and then I had a fellow resident who's also an activist exposing the dangers of the industry, Craig Stevens, with me. So we gave them a tour for only an hour and a half, and they got lost for a half hour, so it was supposed to be at least 2 hours, and really that's a short tour. Normally I give tours of 4 hours or more, so 2 hours is like what I consider a skimpy tour. So that's all they were willing to give us, and then he got lost, so it was an hour and a half, which, I had to really rush through things and give just the skimming over the surface as much as I could.
So what were you actually able to cover with Kevin in that period?
Well, in that period, I showed him a drill site where there was a drill rig, and it was within 1,000 feet of homes on this estate, this property. And it was a quiet country road, and there was this large platform which covers several acres. Usually they use up it can be maybe 20, 25 acres, which includes the access road and this large platform area that's raised up, built on all kinds of stones, hundreds of trucks of stone that comes in. And that's where they build what I call like the city, the extraction city. And that's where they have about 6 trailers with their workers and their supervisors and their managers. And then they put up a large rig, and they start drilling holes thousands of feet down, several thousand feet down, and then several thousand feet across. And they were drilling about 3 holes there, 3 wells. So we came to see how close they want to put these things, which I consider absolutely unacceptable and disturbing, that it can be within 1,000 feet of anyone's home. And all those homes there usually have private water wells. So it's within 1,000 feet of private residential water wells, and what the impacts can be is anybody's guess. You have a chance of having water contamination. Also, you can feel the vibration in the structure of your home, besides hearing the noise and the lights and the smells and the odors and the trucks and the fumes 24/7 for several weeks as they finish up the 3 wells.
So was this an operational well site whilst you were there with Kevin Hollinrake?
Yes, it was operational. Yes, definitely. We were on the public road. It was close to the road. So usually I try and find a site that's close to the road that we can see as much as possible from the public road without going on the access road. This happened to be a Cabot site, which I have received a legal court-appointed injunction from them, which I've been under various aspects of this injunction for 2 years now. So I have to be more careful with that company than all the other companies in my county, which I don't have an injunction with.
Okay, so in the time that you were with Kevin, that was all you were able to do?
No, we saw other things. After the drill site, and of course, he interviewed me, asked me questions, what are my objections? Then Donnie, the BBC reporter, has her photographer videotaping along. Then from there, I showed him impacted homes, which is I showed him people with water contamination and what they're going through for years, several years now, 4 to 5, 6, 7 years, what it's like for them to live with that, and interview them, talk to them, and hear the stories of what happened to them and how they're struggling now with replacement water, which they have to deal with. Bottled water, and then a whole big tank of some kind, whether it's a plastic water buffalo, we call it.
Yeah, the buffalo tank.
Water tank. And a bladder. One of the residents has what he calls a bladder, a giant mattress in his basement that looks like the size of, let's say, a room, 10 by 10 maybe, filled with about 1,200 gallons of water for his household use, not for drinking. Drinking comes in the form of bottled water, which comes in two sizes at this point, gallon sizes. So you get cases of that once a week. And then like smaller drinking bottles for, during the day if you want to have a smaller bottle, like maybe 17 ounces. So he has cases of that. And he's been dealing with that for 4 years, Mr. Chichura. And he was the former superintendent of one of our school districts, and he's retired now. And he is now in litigation with Cabot Oil and Gas and has sued them in the form of arbitration, they call it, to try and get compensation for the loss of his property value, the loss of his water, which they haven't been able to restore to what it was like before for him, which he was able to use easily and copiously, drinking and using it for household use. Now he cannot. So it's a very sad story. So I showed him that, and plus a couple other homes, and they showed the water coming out of treatment plants. One of them had a treatment plant, and the treatment plant was what we call a shed. It's a treatment system, and we have several sheds in our county, and it's up to like $100,000 in equipment to try and make the water somehow household potable use, just for household use, really, not for drinking. And that was shown to us, and then the people would show us the water. This is what the water looks like before it gets treated through the treatment plant. He poured it out of the system before the treatment part, and you can see all this bubbling water, cloudy water, and this has full of gases besides other elements. Because with the gas, usually it brings up other elements, either heavy metals, radioactivity. So I showed him that. So I showed him, let's see, 2 or 3 homes. I believe I showed him, I'd have to look at my tape. I also videotaped aspects of it, had my camera with me. I believe I showed him a compressor station too, to show what that's like, because that has to be every so many miles from each gas developed area. So we have 44 gas compressor stations just in my county. My county is about 800 square miles. And that's what we have so far, because they keep adding them as they need them. So many, let's say if you have 50 to 100 wells, you need another compressor station to process, compress, dehydrate, remove the impurities, and make it market ready. So it's like a refinery, and you see all kinds of emissions, all kinds of stacks, all kinds of noise 24/7, pipelines coming in and out of it. And that's right next to homes also. We have no setbacks for compressor stations. For drilling, we have right now we have a 500-foot setback, which means they can't get any closer than 500 feet unless the owner signs a document allowing it. So the owner could even say, if you need to be closer, the industry might say, well, we need 300 feet. Can we have that? And if the owner agrees, he signs a document, then it can be closer than 500 feet.
I'm sure there's a price that comes with that, though.
I'm sure there is, because he's going to feel it even more. But, some people have said to me, some of them want it so badly because they want money and they need it supposedly so badly. We're kind of a poor county, working class, poor people, and then also people with money. It's a combination. So they're so anxious for that extra money that they've even said things like, just put the drill rig right in my kitchen. Like, the 100-foot, 120-foot drill rig, just put it right in my kitchen and just drill away and just give me that check every month. Not thinking about the future, not thinking about what is going on geologically, under the ground, thousands of feet down, as if nothing could possibly happen. When you're drilling with huge amounts of pressure, removing all kinds of drill cuttings and rocks, and releasing all kinds of gases and metals and components from the rocks themselves, and pouring down millions of gallons of liquid with sand and chemicals, as if that is not going to have any effect.
Really?
That's just going to go easily down there, like a little gentle dream of some kind. You're not going to see any effect. That's how some of these people think, which is so beyond my comprehension.
And that's before we even get on to discussing the waste issue.
Oh, the waste issue. It's like a nuclear waste plant. You're talking millions of gallons of waste water, several different types, and then you have to do something with that. Treat it partially, recycle it, and then when you can't treat it any further, put it in injection wells, which they keep trying to permit more of them, and more people are protesting, thankfully, in the neighborhoods where they want to put them. And of course, then you have thousands of pounds of drill waste, drill cuttings.
Which is, and what is happening with that waste, with the solid waste?
Oh, solid waste. Well, solid waste, they have fun with. They bring it, they partially treat it, and then they bring it to landfills, and they try and spread it all around, especially in New York, in different landfills, then into Pennsylvania, several parts of Pennsylvania.
So hang on a second, let me just stop you there a second, because New York, of course, has instituted an outright ban on direct fracking, but it's taking the toxic waste from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right. Basically, New York has just put a pause on the drilling part of it, the drilling and fracking, that none of that can be done hydraulic fracturing. But you can have compressor stations, you can have pipelines galore, as many as you want. You can have landfills taking in all the waste. You can have the trucks go through right now through southern New York, which borders Pennsylvania, where I live. You see all these trucks on the highways. They're all the sand trucks, the dump trucks, the water trucks. So they can have anything they want of the infrastructure except the actual drilling and fracking. So big deal, so you don't have that part, but you have all the rest, which is also a pain and a disturbance to any community and the environment also. So New York needs to really get their act together and ban the whole thing, which they have representatives and senators who are trying to ban all the other aspects, but it hasn't gone through yet. So that's what they need. They need to ban the whole picture.
Yeah, because the impression that is given, and they won't be the first state to do this, but the impression that's given is that everything's wonderful in New York because they've got this ban. And I think it is a ban. It's not a moratorium, is it? It is a ban?
No, it's not even a full ban. It's basically like the governor saying, well, we can't do it for now, but nothing is legally on the books.
So it's just simply a governor moratorium.
Right, it's a governor's pronouncement, but it's not an actual legal on the books ban, which I think Maryland at this point does have on the books a ban. Now, whether they banned every aspect of it, that I'm not sure about. I have to look more into Maryland. But New York is, it's sort of like a quasi pause for this at this point.
It sounds like Scotland. Yeah. So now when, obviously, after your hour and a half or so with Kevin Hollingray, did he cast any view as to what he thought about what you'd shown him?
Well, he didn't say too much. He was kind of cautious. He was kind of like, tell me what you don't like. And he's sort of like mulling it over. You could see him thinking and asking some questions. Not really saying, well, this is horrifying. This is ridiculous. I don't want this next to my home. So, he was careful. He was just watching and looking and taking notes. And then later, of course, I read articles about how he feels he can do it better than the Americans. So he's going to do better than us. And this way, not have the problems, supposedly, that we have, or the complaints. So he's going to make sure every well is at least 1,000 feet from a home.
Well, that's what he said.
In fact, a mile. He said it's going to be
exactly.
a mile.
I've got it here. This is a direct quote from the interview that he gave. Yeah.
Right.
The MP calls for a 1 mile gap.
Go for that. Like the industry is going to go for that. Then he said 8 miles apart for the gas sites. The industry is going to say, what the heck are you talking about? To hell with that, because that's not enough profit for us. Well, we have to get every ounce of gas out. That gives us possibly some profit. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to put one well site here, pour millions into there, and then we'll go 8 miles away and do it again.
No,
And they're going to say,
exactly.
what's going to happen between those two well sites? We want every ounce of gas from there because that's how we want to make a profit.
Well, you see, there is a little bit of a problem with the statement he made, because here I've got his actual quote that he gave to the journalist Ruth Hayhurst, who runs the excellent website drillordrop.com. And he stated, he said, "I would like to see any fracking activity a mile away from homes and schools." But you see, the problem is that in his constituency, the well that they want to frack is located right here. That's 1 mile exactly from the entrance to the county's biggest revenue earner in terms of tourism. And as you can see, the entire village of Kirby Misperton is pretty much within that 1 mile area. So the chief executive of the company, John Dewar, obviously had a phone call in which he pointed out the facts of life to Kevin Hollingbrake, because having said he wanted a 1 mile exclusion zone, and then having had a conversation with Third Energy, literally a week later, he said, "I won't try to block fracking plans." So, you know, basically one has to ask the question, what was the value of his trip to Pennsylvania? I mean, I think what he was hoping for was that he would go to Pennsylvania and he would come back and say, "Yeah, it's absolutely fine. You know, we can do a better job than America. You know, we are that arrogant as Brits that."
And I thought Americans were super arrogant. So you guys are maybe one shade more arrogant than us.
Well, obviously we have politicians that are certainly arrogant beyond belief. And, so all of the problems that have been experienced in the US and Australia, we're just going to completely ignore because we're British.
Right.
I mean, it is unbelievable.
We can do it right. Right.
It's truly staggering.
But why can't, well, first of all, you need to start a campaign, do the best you can to say, "Mr. Hollingbrake, please put the first gas well next to your home and wherever your children go to school." And put it within, like what we have, which would be 500 feet, 300 feet. But put it right next to your home. Since you think it's not a problem, that it should be okay for anybody, why don't you get the first hit? And that's what they need to do for every legislator who approves of fracking. Put the wells right next to their homes, and then give us a report, 3 months later,
a couple of years down the road.
Yeah, and 9 months later, let us know how you liked it, and then we'll talk some more. But we'll see how many of them want to take the direct hit, which they will think is okay for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now you've also, in the last week or so, had a couple of other visitors. You had Joe and Steve White, who are actually constituents of Kevin Hollingbrake.
Yes.
And, obviously, having attended a couple of meetings with Kevin Hollingbrake following his visit to Pennsylvania, then a couple of his constituents decided to actually go out there and see for themselves. And I think they might have a slightly different take than Kevin Hollingbrake, but I'll find that out next week, because hopefully Joe and Steve White will join me on Fracking Nightmare next week. Now, Vera.
Yeah, they were great. I want to just say that I had a lot of fun with them. They were great, and they were willing to really take the time, as much time as I was willing to give, which I said to them basically, whatever you want. So we did 9 hours of a tour.
So hang on a second.
9 hours.
Joe and Steve White did 9 hours. Kevin Hollingbrake did 1.5 hours.
Right. So okay. Joanne and Steve saw quite a lot in the 9 hours, saw more people, more sites, and they got much more information, and to see if this is something they really want. So I think you'll hear what they have to say, and I'm sure, were pretty horrified, as most people are, when they really give it time. And when they consider that they could possibly be the next victim, because they're not a legislator. They're not wealthy elitists. They're not a legislator, so they could be the next victim of the industry. Because if you let them into your area, it could be next to your house, because it's not going to be next to the legislator's house. or the MP's house,
Exactly.
or the rich elitists. It's not going to be next to their mansion.
Well, hang on a second. Let's change the terminology, because I don't refer to them as elitists. I refer to them as parasites.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Rich parasites.
The rich parasites, exactly. Feeding off the backs of humanity.
Not going to be next to their mansion.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
Like,
So just to put it in perspective, I mean, I know that Joe and Steve visited, with a number of other people as well, but they were with you 6 times longer than Kevin Hollinrake. So I think that Joe and Steve really have something that needs to be shared, and hopefully they'll be doing that with us next week. I'm sure they'll be doing it obviously with their fellow residents in North Yorkshire. Now,
yes, I'd like to know when it is, because I'd love to watch them.
Well, hopefully it'll be next week, so next Monday night.
Oh, next Monday? Okay.
Next Monday. Now, we're running out of time, Vera, but I want to, raise people's awareness that you are still doing what you're doing, despite the fact that you have this restriction on your activities, banning you from 300 plus square miles. But,
well, that has changed. That has changed. That was the first injunction. I'm on my 3rd injunction.
Your 3rd injunction.
So I'm on my 3rd permanent injunction for the rest of my life.
And how much
being appealed.
How much does this ban you from?
Well, this now they had to scale it down because it was so ridiculous. When you say 350 square miles, that's just for my county, not for all of Pennsylvania. My county is 800 square miles approximately. So this is about 40% of my county where I live. So that's what I was banned from. And then we had to go to court. Lawyers came forward and they fought for a reduction. So now I have to stay 100 feet from any frack site or drilling site. And I have to stay from the driveways. They have driveways that they make to their sites. I have to stay me only in the whole county, me only in the whole state, possibly even me only in the whole United States. I have to stay 25 feet from their sacred driveway. I can't step in front of it within that 25 feet. Otherwise, I'm in violation, contempt. I can get fines, possible jail, and court costs. So, and then if I do, also, what's some of the other things? I have to make sure everybody else kind of doesn't trespass. I have to talk to them. And this is something that they put on me, and I have to now, and I've already been dragged to court several times. I've been dragged to court 7 times for all kinds of issues that are fracking, I feel, related, industry related, people who are landowners who want me out, who want this for their own little pocketbooks to be graced and filled. So they have to make it harder for me, discredit me, and that's what they do. They discredit any activists, spread rumors, make us look like some kind of eco-terrorists so that people are afraid, and then they make others afraid to even come forward.
So it's land of the free, provided you don't actually question the establishment or challenge the corporatocracy in any way.
Right, as long as you follow the rules and be a nice, quiet old lady.
Yeah,
they'll leave you alone.
Well, of course they've really gone for you. They've really gone for you in a big way, because earlier, just a few months ago now, they dragged you back to court for allegedly, for filming a conversation. Now, you were openly filming this conversation. This is about 3 years ago, I think. You were openly filming this conversation.
Over 2 years. 2 years and 2 months, I think.
Okay, so you were openly filming this conversation with,
I had the camera
with a lawyer.
on me. I had the camera on me, and I was filming this conversation, which is asking for an application. Application to be in our July 4th parade. And I was denied the application. I can't even get an application like any other citizen. And why is that? Because I'm an anti-fracker in my own community. So I can't be in the parade like everybody else can. So I couldn't even get an application. So I filmed that and then shared it with my DA, the district attorney in my county. And they sat on it for almost 2 years, and then they decided to prosecute. 6 felonies. 6 felonies, which means up to 7 years in jail per felony. 7 times 6 is what, 42?
Yeah. For
up to 42 years they could give me for doing that. because of the law in Pennsylvania, which I didn't know, you have to get the permission of everybody in a so-called private conversation. I don't consider asking for an application in an office a private conversation. But, I had to go to court, and you have to prove this, you have to have a jury, spend tens of thousands, have a lawyer. It's a big mess. The whole legal system is basically for the rich, and even the rich lose, probably 50% of the time. So I took a deal. They offered me a deal. They said, because first-time offense, we give you a special program, ARD. And if you do community service, 75 hours, you're on probation for a year. And if you're a good girl, which means if you're a good old lady, don't cause any trouble, don't get any criminal offenses, then we will strike your record clean. We'll make it clean again. So right now I'm in the probation period. So we'll see what happens.
And probation is actually potentially restrictive as well in terms of travel, because you raised this with me because we've invited you to participate in the first AV America, Alternative View America event in Portland next April. And you have some concern that your probation terms may actually prevent you from participating.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, I wanted to go to Europe to visit family. I have family in Europe, in Serbia and in Italy, and I wanted to visit there, and that was a possible problem during this probation period. They said I have to call up customs and see if they're going to give me a hard time. So I didn't even bother at that point. And it could be a problem. I have to contact my probation officer, let him know what I want to do. And he's been very good and very sympathetic. So he probably will say, okay, as far as the United States. Beyond the borders, it's a little more tricky.
Yeah. So now, obviously, this is the industry effectively trying to clip your wings and cut your legs off, basically, at the same time, restricting your access to any area where they're operating. And now, of course, effectively trying to push you into economic poverty. So what court costs have you incurred and fines have you incurred to date?
Well, so far I've incurred at least, $1,000 with a contempt charge that they made a phony contempt charge on me. And they had false witnesses, even a false witness as far as a gas worker, claim I was breaking and violating the injunction, which I wasn't. And I had witnesses. But the judge is the least landowner. Our judges are least landowners in the area, our lawyers, our DAs. So he rules in favor of the gas company. So now it's on appeal, that particular, my civil charges. We'll see what happens with judges who are like 5 hours away and who may not be landowners to the gas company or have not leased their land. So I'm hoping I'll get a better decision. So I've had $1,000 with that. Then I had $1,000 fine now with the felony charges, where they were trying to make me a felon. And then I have court costs and also some lawyer fees. Some of the lawyers are pro bono, which they're not charging, and others are charging for their time. So I have a combination. And this is the situation. So right now, I'm getting donations, and people have been raising money to help me with these costs, which has been very helpful and very nice of everybody.
Well, I'd like to do what we'd like to do our bit to that as well, Vera. So I want to draw people to attention to your website, which is Vera Scroggins. Scroggins, SCROGGINS, verascroggins.com. And if you'd like to support Vera, then on her website there is a donate button. And if you hit the donate button, it does take you to this page here. And Vera's PayPal account is veraduerga@yahoo.com. So don't be confused if you see this page. And if you do have a PayPal account and want to make a direct donation to Vera, then you can do it by using the usual PayPal process and send it to veraduerga@yahoo.com. So, Vera, I'm sure we will speak again before the Portland event. Okay. But, thank goodness for people like yourself. I mean, obviously, the industry has a very strong foothold in Pennsylvania. Of course, the good news is that the price of oil is pushing the industry into mothballs, or bankruptcy, I should say, probably more like. But, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, OPEC.
Yeah, exactly. And, keep doing what you're doing and keep us posted. And, we will definitely be speaking again on Fracking Nightmare, and we will see you at AV America in Portland next April.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to take a break now, and in this break, we're going to see a short clip from Russia Today reporting on Vera's legal drama. So join me after this for part 2.
As the year end approaches, we plan to revisit some of the personalities that shaped 2014. Make sure to check out our New Year's special for the perspective of the people that made the year matter. Here's one story just to give you a taste of what's ahead. Meet Vera Scroggins, an American grandmother and anti-fracking activist who is now banned from going to shops and hospitals near her home in Pennsylvania. Here's how it happened. To raise awareness about the environmental consequences of shale gas extraction, she canvassed people in her area. That led to a court banning Vera from oil company property, which turned out to be nearly half her town. We've been following Vera's plight closely, and here's what she told us just as events were unfolding.
I will continue to do it because I live here. I don't want to live with this, and I don't want it for future generations. I don't want it for my children or anyone I know. So I'll continue to do this as long as I can.
We also caught up with Vera just ahead of the new year. Despite all her legal troubles, she said it was a good year for the anti-fracking movement, with New York's newly imposed ban fueling her optimism.
This year was especially momentous because New York finally decided to ban fracking, and I was working with New Yorkers, besides trying to ban it in my own state of Pennsylvania, and it finally happened.
Well, what about the year to come? Well, Vera isn't planning to stop her fight, even though breaking a court ban could mean fines or even jail time.
I'm still doing my tours despite the harassment, despite what Cabot has done in court, and right now more and more citizens are protesting in Pennsylvania, don't want to have fracking. So I think 2015 is going to be a better year for anti-fracking, for closing down even the industry, which continues to rack up.
Well, that's Vera Scroggins, one amazing lady, and there's a lot of similarity between Vera and Brian and David Monk and John and Joe Jenkin in Queensland, because these people live in an area where the industry has established a very firm foothold. And much of the community either takes the dirty money from the gas company or just throws up its hands and says, oh, well, we tried, we failed, what can you do? But thanks to people such as Vera, Brian, David, John and Joe, there are people in the community who will not give up, who will continue to try to raise awareness of the horrendous contamination and ecological damage that this industry causes wherever it establishes a foothold. So just to remind you again, if you want to support Vera, and particularly any viewers stateside, Vera's not part of any organisation, she's not part of any group, she's not getting any funding from any NGOs. She does what she does as an independent individual. So I know exactly how she feels, and she has these very pressing costs to address. So her website, verascroggins.com. And as I intimated, after 6 alternative view events in the UK, and we have AV7 coming up in May of next year, we're going to have the first Alternative View America, and this event's going to be in Portland, Oregon, on April the 23rd, 24th of next year. The website is not live yet. It will be by the end of November 2015. And the website is www.avamerica.org. So that's Vera Scroggins, and she certainly has one hell of a story. Right, we're changing tack. We're coming back to the UK. And my next guest, well, he's one of the two people featured in this particular video. So take a look at this piece of footage from Barton Moss.
It looks like filming at a protest could get you thrown into jail for drunk driving. Confused? So was Dr. Stephen Pears as he filmed at an anti-fracking rally in Manchester. He was allegedly pushed down to the ground by a police officer who then proceeded to accuse him of being drunk.
Are you drunk? You've been drinking this morning? You've been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You've been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You've been drinking?
I've had tea.
You've arrived in your car?
No, I've not.
You've arrived in your car this morning? You've had a drink, haven't you? You've had a drink this morning. Where's your car? Been drinking this morning.
Despite Mr. Pears's claims that all he'd had was a cup of tea and the fact that his car wasn't anywhere nearby, Sergeant David Kehoe carried on, even threatening arrest.
You've been detained at this moment in time. Have you got this lad that's coming in the car this morning? I can smell alcohol on his breath. He's already admitted to having a drink.
No. I've got it on film.
Yeah,
I've not had a drink at all. I've had tea this morning, officer.
Dr. Pears refused to be breathalyzed, repeating that he had not been drinking and that he was simply a pedestrian in a public place. As the footage shows, the policeman even tried to rally some of his colleagues against the protester.
We've got two staff here.
I'm a pedestrian.
They're going to go through the drink drive procedure with you.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
Okay, short officers here.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
Stephen Pears was charged, but the case was dropped as it got to court due to insufficient evidence. Mr. Pears posted the video on YouTube, claiming the whole thing is a ridiculous, trumped-up charge and that the policeman was trying to frame him. A Greater Manchester police spokesman said that the complaint has now gone to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. And, well, we know how well they do their job, considering they've recently had to apologise for wrongly claiming Mark Duggan had shot at police. Oops.
Well, so here we have on the screen the two main characters involved in that little altercation. Sergeant David Kehoe, who as a result of that was actually promoted to Inspector. So Inspector David Kehoe and Dr. Stephen Pears. So I don't think you need too many guesses to work out which one of those two individuals is my guest tonight. So Dr. Stephen Pears, have you been drinking?
just tea, Ian.
Just tea? That's two. Yeah. You've had two. I know you've had two. And where's your car?
Well, I didn't have a car that day. I didn't even have any car keys, so I certainly wasn't going to blow it into his bag for him.
That was, unfortunately, I have to say, that that drama epitomised the sort of police behaviour and demeanour at Barton Moss. Now, I will be fair and say there were a few exceptions, but unfortunately, the majority of Greater Manchester Police, and particularly the TAU, their attitude was one of continuous aggression and intimidation.
I believe they're trained that way. It's they're sent into the situation there and told to be violent. They were used as threats to intimidate everybody that was protesting there, and even me. I was just acting in an observer capacity there. They were intimidating me. They were threatening me with arrest, and obviously they went and concocted this arrest, which has come back to haunt them quite a bit.
Well, of course, so the ultimate charges, which were refusing to take a breath test, I believe that they were completely thrown out.
It was dropped at court. They offered no evidence. I immediately launched a complaint. It took a further 2 weeks to get my video equipment back, and obviously that went straight onto YouTube, and the video went viral. Millions of hits all around the world. So it's I think it's a very important video to highlight the absolute corruption that the police think that they can get away with,
and the subsequent promotion of Sergeant Kehoe to the rank of Inspector.
He seems to have been promoted further, because we've seen him on things like the Conservative Party conference, dressed in a suit and tie, hanging about with the terrorism police. So they seem to be associated with him, whether that's a further promotion. But they certainly haven't suspended him or done anything. And this is flying now in the face of the IPCC, which are calling for him to be dismissed for gross misconduct.
Well, we have this. This is a report from the Manchester Evening News. So just to prove that it's not hearsay or conjecture, this is from the Manchester Evening News. The police watchdog rules senior officer in fracking bust-up should face gross misconduct charge. And it now acknowledges his promotion here. Inspector David Kehoe is accused of lying to detain an anti-fracking campaigner at Barton Moss in Eccles after footage was shown to the IPCC. Now, one has to smile, and I use that term loosely, when reading on the report, because the last paragraph in that report is GMP, Greater Manchester Police spokeswoman said, Greater Manchester Police has received the recommendations made by the IPCC following their investigation into this matter. We have responded to the IPCC with a number of observations in relation to their decision-making, and we are still awaiting a response from the IPCC to our representations. A spokesman for the Greater Manchester Police Federation, the association which represents officers, said, we reject the recommendations made by the IPCC in the strongest possible terms. We remain wholeheartedly supportive of the officer. We welcome negotiations between the force and the IPCC, and we hope that we can all work together to find a suitable outcome. So basically, the Greater Manchester Police and the Police Federation have basically gone to the IPCC.
Yes, the first case I've ever heard of them actually doing that, but they're just totally refusing to do what the IPCC have recommended. It makes you wonder why the IPCC was set up in the first place.
Well, again, it demonstrates that the IPCC is a total charade. It's purely there to convey the impression that there is some oversight, when in reality, if the oversight committee come up with a decision that the police themselves and the Police Federation don't agree with, they just basically ignore it.
I've encountered this for quite a few years, where you make a complaint to any corporation and they investigate themselves at the very first section, and then they push it up where they investigate themselves, and the police are exactly the same, where they set up this body to look independent to act like an oversight. But it has been predominantly manned by ex-police officers who have just fallen into a cushy role and just gone along with their serving buddies and agreed with the decisions of the complaint system. Obviously, on this particular case, I made certain checks about who was conducting the case and which ones were ex-officers, and they did have quite a few changes of the investigating team, and the overall people that investigated it finally were not ex-police officers.
So, but the bottom line is that you don't hold too much hope here that anything's really going to happen. And of course, they work on the basis of it's a war of attrition. They work on the basis that if they can just keep kicking the can down the road, eventually you're going to get bored and go away. But somehow I doubt that's actually going to happen. And I think that you probably will keep on the case.
Yeah, I'll keep on it. Obviously, we've gone through the entire police complaint system, which has taken over a year and a half, and where it looks like total inaction, like on every single stage. And now we'll launch a litigation against them in the High Court in London.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. And of course, we'll keep people posted. Now, meanwhile, we are speaking to you tonight from the Upton Community Protection Camp. And what we see on screen here is literally the north of England under environmental attack. I mean, the British government, as I have said many, many times over the last few weeks, has effectively launched environmental warfare on the people of the north of England. And of course, they are facilitated by people such as Kevin Hollinrake, who we were talking about earlier in the programme, with Vera Scroggins, MPs who pretend to represent the interest of their constituents, but ultimately it becomes evident that they are simply there to facilitate the corporatist agenda on behalf of the political puppets. So you're over here in Upton, just near Chester Zoo. Let's bring that down a little bit. Let's have a look at this area here. And we'll get it down a bit more. And here we are, just around Chester. This is Chester here. And if we expand this area here, here is Chester. And of course, you are literally just about, I think, 500 yards or so from Chester Zoo. And this is a plot of land that the protection community have occupied now for, I think, around about 18 months, maybe even a little bit more than 18 months. And you guys were in court last Thursday. So just give us a rundown of what happened in court, Steve.
Well, we're in the High Court. We had a Justice Hodge that was hearing the case, and we did instructed barristers to represent the protection camp and put forward our case. That was we're here trying to protect the environment, and we're working with the community and that. There's been great support from the community. The court was absolutely jam-packed with locals who travelled over for the court case from Upton. We had stacks and stacks of letters. Here's some of the letters that were handed over to the judge in support of the protection camp. There was over 130 letters. Many went to the judge direct. We had letters from councils, parish councils. We had an MP write a letter. The local MP came to the court in Manchester and was turned away by Group 4 security. He was refused entry to the building, along with members of the press. When this was raised in the court, before we actually got stuck into the case, the judge sent the police out to go and fetch that MP back into the building, and they went all the way to the train station to fetch him all the way back and bring him back into the courtroom so that he could support the camp in that particular case. It was an interesting case. We know from the Barton Moss ruling.
By the way, you do know it was the same judge, don't you? You know that Judge Hodge is the judge who presided over the Barton Moss hearing. And of course, I remember that very well because I was one of the named defendants.
Yes, he was. It's the same judge, and the picking Manchester court. Obviously, Chester is quite a distance. There is a High Court a lot closer, which they could have gone and used. But why use a local High Court when they can run to Manchester and use exactly the same judge that's conducted other cases and ruled in iGas's favour in every single case?
Well, I made the observation that I actually thought, because the initial hearing of the Barton Moss case, which actually revolved around, as you will remember, whether the verge that the camp was pitched on was actually within the lease of the farmer or still within the jurisdiction of Peel Holdings. And on the Friday, when the court rose, I actually felt that our barrister, Lindsay Johnson, had convinced the judge that basically it wasn't Peel and that piece of land was down to the farmer. But the demeanour of the judge over the weekend changed dramatically, and the judge was a completely different individual on the Monday morning than he had been on the previous days of the hearing. And, call it a hunch, but, it seemed like he'd had a phone call over the weekend to point out a few facts of life.
The political pressures involved in this are immense.
Enormous.
The Barton Moss ruling was a very bad ruling. It's incorrect in law. It should not have been Peel Holdings bringing that case. It should have been the farmer who was not supportive of the iGas's and Peel Holdings position. I don't think he wanted to be involved. That he wouldn't do that. And what they've effectively done there is made a ruling in the High Court that is being used in every single fracking case. Every camp that sets up, they will evict using and citing the Barton Moss, which is a totally incorrect.
But the reality is that the Barton Moss case didn't actually reach a conclusion because it went to appeal. And in fact, because the camp had moved on, the appeal was effectively cancelled. So there was no ruling. There is no legal precedent from the Barton Moss case. In fact, if there is any precedent, unfortunately, it's Borkham, on the basis that a couple of individuals decided not to move at the end of the campaign. But let's you guys have been given. I know you're in the process of launching an appeal, but at the moment, the way it stands is that you have until December the 4th, I believe, to vacate the site?
There's no appeal being launched. The ruling in the High Court is not going to be challenged. We've got till the 4th to go, and obviously there's people here that are here for the long haul, that do not want fracking in this country. We've got a local community here to protect, and it's a case of this is now the front line in the war against fracking in this country, and we'd like everybody to come down and support the opposition to iGas moving onto this property and destroying the environment. They should be made to do a lot more to protect the environment than just drill with the average. Barton Moss was contaminated. Right, if they contaminate here, you've got Chester Zoo with over 17,000 animals there that potentially could get killed, along with the local community. The physical harm that's going to be done to the community here cannot be tolerated, and it's a community-based opposition to this. It's unlawful. What they're doing is genocide. Right? They're trying to poison our water. They're trying to kill people with this. At the end of the day, they're going to use radioactive materials in the process. They're going to dump radioactive materials in the abandoned wells. There's no upside for the public on this. There's just short-term corporate profit, and that's what people need to stand against. So we envisage quite a bit of opposition to iGas's move onto this property from all elements of society, and anybody who wants to come down with a tent is quite welcome to and join the opposition.
Well, let's just go back to this map again and look at the area that's under attack. I mean, this is the quadrilla license that comes down into south of the Fylde, down to just north of or around Southport or Formby. But this is the area here. This is all iGas. And this is the area that they want to start drilling. And of course, as Brian Monk says many times, it started with just one well. And so basically, Chester really needs to become like Bentley in Australia or Belcoo in Ireland, because in reality now, due process has been exhausted. The application has, application has been approved to evict the camp. And once the camp is evicted, then of course iGas will be looking to establish a well on that site as quickly as possible. And although the iGas stock price is under 20p right now, I think we all know that INEOS are hovering in the background, waiting for the iGas stock price to tank, probably to somewhere around about 12, 15 pence, and then snap it up. And INEOS upstream is looking to become, the major unconventional gas company in the UK. So in reality, as you rightly say, this is the front line, effectively from the 4th of December. That's not to detract from what's occurring in North Yorkshire, but that's a little bit further down the road. And then, of course, we'll mention briefly in a while also South Yorkshire, North Nottinghamshire at Misson Springs, which is also iGas. So this is absolutely now down to the local community, and I know that you guys at Upton have done an amazing job over the last 18 months or so of raising awareness around the community, and hopefully that the community will be there and will support the camp.
Tesla were drilling test bores like for seismic testing in the area. The camp came out and we had local residents stopping those vehicles, people of all ages, and people from all elements of the local community. It's great to see, and that's what we envisage in the weeks and months to come. Seeing that community coming together and putting on this Bentley-style blockade to stop this illegal activity. There's no way that they have the permission of the residents. We've got the support of the parish council. We've got the support of the local council. We've had surveys conducted where 86% of this population are against fracking in this area. It's absolutely crazy that iGas should try and push it through here. we're here to stop it. There's a line in the sand, and iGas is trying to cross it.
And of course, we encourage people to visit the camp, to come meet with the people at the camp to get more information. And we also encourage people to go along to iGas events. And as is always the case, we encourage people to do their own research and come to their own determination as to whether or not this is something that they are prepared to have in their backyard. And I think we know very well that anybody who really spends any amount of time looking at the devastation this industry has caused will realise that this is not something that should be allowed to kick off in this densely populated country. Steve,
iGas is running scared. I went to the local Tarvin parish council meeting. iGas turned up there with Tesla, and they had 3 bodyguards with them. That's why they think they need bodyguards.
Bodyguards, yeah.
A local parish meeting is ludicrous. They are very scared. They know what they're doing is wrong. They know there's huge opposition against it. They just don't care. They want their short-term profit, and then they're going to leave us and leave our children with the mess to clean up, which is going to be near impossible.
Steve, thank you so much for joining me this evening, and thanks for the update. We will have more updates from Upton. And one thing is, I think for sure that there's going to be a lot of people migrating towards Upton in the coming weeks. And bear in mind that it is now time for the community to show their opposition by putting boots on the ground. Now we're going to go into... Sorry, Steve?
We're on Facebook on the Upton Community Protection Camp. Anybody who wants information, can go on there, log in, communicate with us, and we're quite happy to accept the support from up and down the country and internationally.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for joining me tonight. We'll be hooking up again soon. Now we're going to take a break, and in this break we're going to see a short video from 38 Degrees looking at the potential devastation of Ryedale. And here are some of the comments and observations from the Ryedale community.
Ryedale is a very tranquil area.
It's a beautiful rural location.
The economic prosperity of this area is based on its agriculture and tourism.
Third Energy are intending on hydraulically fracturing the KM8 well at Kirby-Misperton with the intention of producing gas for the next 9 years from that well.
In this one area, they're looking at maybe 1,000 wells.
As soon as they find gas commercially and this thing suddenly snowballs, it's not just Ryedale, it all spreads through the whole of northern England.
The fracking industry has demonstrated wherever it's gone to be a heavy industrialisation of the landscape with spills, with pollution of water and air. So as a GP, I'm worried about illnesses which seem to follow fracking.
Third Energy have said that it's going to be nothing to worry about, small scale, discreet.
That's exactly what the energy companies promised us in Australia too, but that's not what they delivered. They delivered destroyed land. They've left us with a toxic chemical nightmare, and that is what the industry brings to you. They came in, they took our land, they took our lives, and they destroyed our communities.
I'm on the front lines here in America. Most of us are on water wells, and now we have 10 townships that have families with contaminated water because of nearby gas drilling.
There was no one there to clarify and actually do an investigation to find out why the kids up the road, why their noses were bleeding all the time, why the woman up the road had rashes, why people's dogs started dying. We didn't know it was the gas making us sick, but what I do know is that we weren't sick before they came.
You look at what's going on in America and they say, well, we're improving the regulation, it's all getting better. Prove it. Prove it to us. Where have we got the evidence to prove that it can be done safely or otherwise?
We don't need this industry in this area.
I'm scared, and I'm right to be scared.
Our generation has the chance to make it better for the next generation, from the kids. And I don't think our generation should steal their future. I really don't.
The people of Ryedale love Ryedale. We want to pass it on to our grandchildren in good order.
This is something that's worth fighting for. It's something that we need to keep, these glorious green spaces. If we despoil them, we don't get them back. That's gone forever. It's where we live, it's what we love, it's where we are, and I'm not giving it up.
Third Energy have come to the area thinking we're going to lie down. we're going to fight them all the way.
And welcome back to what is going to be a very short part 3. And my thanks to 38 Degrees, not just for their permission to show that video tonight, but also for the support that they are providing to the anti-fracking campaign around the country, and of course not least to Rydale. Now we will be focusing again on Rydale next week with hopefully Joe and Steve White, who, as Vera Scroggins mentioned, were her guests in Pennsylvania last week. But just very quickly, I want to draw your attention to another iGas application. This time the other side of the Pennines from Chester, on literally the South Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire border. And the information is on the FRACK Free Nottingham website, FRACK Free Nottinghamshire. And here's the information in the Idle Valley. And this is at a place that iGas want to drill and frack. And iGas have never made any secret of the fact that they absolutely intend to drill an exploratory well and frack it. So no obfuscation here. And they want to target a village here, the village of Misson Springs, just a few miles to the east of Bawtry. Now, next week I will have a guest on my show from the Misson community who will be updating us on this application. Now, there is opportunity to submit objection until December the 9th, but rather than wait until next week's show, then I would encourage you to go to the FRACK Free Nottinghamshire website and take a look at this information. And if you live anywhere around this area, remember, it started with just one well. Meanwhile, thanks very much for joining me tonight. Thanks to my guest, Vera Scroggins, and Dr. Stephen Piers, who I promised you had only ever had a cup of tea before he came on air. And we'll see you next week, hopefully with Joe and Steve White and somebody from Misson Springs. So thank you very much, and good night, and stay safe.